today I am going to be doing a video discussing my childhood, and I am going to be lighting this here as a way to cleanse the space so that my words are true and pure and correct for the process of healing. We go counterclockwise to release. Counterclockwise to release. Counterclockwise to release. And one more time. Counterclockwise to release. This smells so amazing. There's a very strong possibility that I will set off the smoking alarm here in a minute, but that's okay. I'll just cut that part out. I need to check the sound anyhow. The Gypsy King tells about his life and about how his family lived. I'm thinking I need to have this higher so that I don't have to reach down so far to speak into the mic. This still leaves my hands free to tell the story. So they're traveling through Europe in their caravan. There's an entire tribe that go from city to city and never stay in one place very long. They are artisans. They create clothing and musical instruments and trinkets, sometimes magical trinkets, other times jewelry. And when they arrive in the city, they set up caravans outside, showing their wares. There are those among them that are entertainers, those who like to dance, and there are those that play instruments like guitars, or maybe even a drum. Some of the women and the men have the gift and are able to use the hands of a person to tell about them. It's more about reading the aura within the lines. It's about feeling another's emotion, being able to feel their emotion and give them words to describe. But the lines on the hands tell the story in an energetic imprint. Some had crystal balls and understood how to do magic they were naturally connected to the elements: earth, water, wind, and fire. When you bring these four together, you create them. Well, you are them. We have these in the human body. But when you bring these all together, the fifth arrives. That's the fifth element. Some of these women and men carried active DNA for superhuman abilities in the future. But see, the way that my parents were told this story was through the words of the cult leader. He was telling this story as if this Gypsy King was his spirit guide. There were so many beautiful songs written throughout my childhood, learned by everyone in the group. And sung together, connecting us energetically to this space in the past. On the very last night of this tribe of gypsies' human lives. We would all dress up, and the women would dance. I was only a little girl then, but I loved watching the dance. Then the children would get up and we would dance. And everyone would be dancing together. Come along and join our gypsy caravan. We're heading for another mountain, for another land. And if you'd like to go for a ride, we'll go so high. We'll touch the sky. Dancing together, holding hands in a circle, back and forth, everybody doing the same dance together. And then someone breaks off and starts a train dance. All of the girls are dressed in flowing dresses, and we put scarves on our head and wear big hoop earrings and tassels like I did in the last video. I decided I should bring my tassels over here. I decided that I should just bring my tassels there were flutes. Sometimes something as fancy as a violin or a harp or bongos, sometimes all, especially in Puerto Rico at Musica con Vida. Musica con Vida was a place where all of the musicians came together. I was probably 5 at the time. And on this particular night, after the children went to bed, I looked outside of my tent. I think I had fallen asleep and woken up. And I was afraid because I didn't know where my parents were. They weren't with me. But I opened the tent and I looked outside and I saw all of the adults pretty much naked, having sex. Oh, no, it wasn't couples. It was free love, free hippie love. I got lucky in the group. It seems that I wasn't exposed for very long to the biggest parties of this nature. See, my parents joined a group that started in Huntington Beach in 1968. The 4 children of a preacher who continued to get kicked out of churches in the southwestern part of the United States. His children were old enough now to become ministers on their own as teenagers. For a minute, the energy being released was correct. It was truth. It was pure. But it was not because of Berg. It was because of his children. Berg put himself front and center because of his ego. But his ego also contained a very dark side. Berg was a pedophile. He had huge issues from early experiences in life that impacted his view of sexuality. And eventually impacted me because my parents joined this group that he created. The group has counted over 200,000 people over the past 40 years as having been in the group. My mother and father joined in the group. You couldn't be a leader at the beginning unless you were married. And so early on, a lot of marriages came into being. And I was the result of one of those marriages. My parents met and were married within 3 months of meeting each other, I believe. Not very long. My mother would go on to have 11 births, with me as her first. By the time I was 4 years old, my mother had had 3 other children. So there were 4 of us in diapers. My father had an additional 2 children with other women, which meant that there were 3 mothers and 5 fathers for all of my 15 siblings. When Berg was in Southern California, he came in contact with Mormons, Scientologists, those that practiced scientific spirituality, such as George Van Tassel, who created the Integratron. Early on, there was purity and truth. And one of the truths that came into being was the esoterics, which Berg metabolized into his teaching when he left America. He wrote a series of letters called I Got a Split, because, as it turned out, he made Interpol's most wanted list because he was stealing so many young children in America. One of those children, young adult, one of those, 2 people that Berg stole were my father and my uncle. My grandparents understood that they had joined a cult and attempted to rescue, but my father and uncle wouldn't see them, and so they left without them, and my father disappeared for over 30 years. My mother's family also was missing her, and we, of course, as children, didn't know our blood family, because after Berg left America, he decided that everyone needed to leave America, and so we became an international group. We first went to Puerto Rico, and then Mexico, and then the Philippines, and then Japan, and then Korea. I was gone from America until I was 17 years old, at which time I returned, still in the group. The group was centered around a Christian, fundamentalist, apocalyptic, Baptist, evangelical, spiritual teaching with hints of Eastern mysticism, spiritism, Mormonism. I know that he plagiarized from many because I found them in my educational process since leaving the group as an adult. Ooh, I caught some light there. I love when that happens. Can you see that, folks? From what I understand, the group still exists today, but yet in a very weakened, docile, and reconformed to society perspective. Berg opened portals through sexuality and let his demons in. And the woman that he chose as his new wife, Karen Zerby, or Mama Maria, did a very good job of usurping the power over the group. Well, Burke kind of gave it to her. But towards the end, she just kept him drunk and fed him women and ran the group her own way. This was about the time I became a young teenager. So we were very sexualized as children because of their free love hippie concept, which I now know was based on Aleister Crowley and his views of sex magic, which is, as Burke called it, the law of love. As long as what you are doing sexually is harming no one, there is nothing wrong with it. See, the problem was in the interpretation. The law of love means that you will never hurt. And the way that this was practiced was assuming that children were able to metabolize sexual energy with an adult or an elder, which is the definition of incest. This is a fallacy. The dark, jealous God is the dark demon. Now, with this being said, I understand why I had to be born into this group. It's because in past lives, I was the one on the horse lopping off the heads of people as a very strong masculine warrior. And because my soul was still bound by the laws of karma, karma in the Vedic tradition being represented by Saturn or Father Time, I came into this life to burn all my bad karma so that I could release from it. So there was a true darkness to my childhood. And that darkness was the epitome of incest, which I am redefining right now. Incest is when an authority figure, age, older, takes by force to satisfy the creed of the dark, jealous God. This has happened in all major religions throughout patriarchy. The body of patriarchy, which is what the Babylonian king saw in his dream. As much as my childhood was difficult, wouldn't change a thing, because I really like who I am today. And if I hadn't gone through the pain and the difficulty, I wouldn't have the understanding that I have today or be who I am. Because there's a brightness inside of me. I was a student of this megalomaniac. I read and studied everything that was published by his wife, from the early material back from the 1970s all the way to the latest material. And I have metabolized all the Christian doctrine. He even had Baha'i at one point. He always plagiarized the most famous. But who I am with my understanding of the dimensions comes directly from him plagiarizing a book called Flatlander. I am grateful for the vision that I have, and through the experience of being raised by an amalgamized doctrine, I have been able to discover deeper truths. Those deeper truths have taken me farther than I could have ever imagined. And I'll continue to share my stories with you.